Good day everyone, I'm Harvey and welcome to another episode of my Vodcast. Our topic today is as controversial as it is important to discuss. Today we'll be going to talk about a topic that's very timely as well as relevant. And this is the reason why our video is entitled Climate Change, a Call to Action. This podcast aims to talk about the Sustainable Development Goals, primarily the climate action. But first, let us welcome our guest, Mr. Armando Paler, a well-known climate change researcher, and Ms. Ellery Antolin, who is a well-known environmental activist in the Philippines. Okay, so now we are going to talk about what Sustainable Development Goals are. These goals are designed to be the basis of humans globally for a better and more sustainable future by 2030. But we are going to focus on the climate action goal. Ms. Ellery Antolin, can you tell us about what climate action goal is?
Thank you, Harvey. And first of all, thank you so much for inviting me here with Mr. Paler to talk about climate change. Good morning to all of us, and I hope we still have a wonderful day despite this negativity that are surrounding us in this past few weeks. So according to the United Nations, there are 5 goals of climate action. The first goal is to strengthen resiliency and adaptive capacity to climate-related hazards and natural disasters in all countries. Secondly is to integrate climate change measures into national policies, strategies, and planning. The third is to improve education, awareness raising, and human and institutional capacity on climate change mitigation, adaptation, impact reduction, and early warning. Fourthly, for a more specific goal, the United Nations wanted to implement the commitment undertaken by developed country parties to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change to a goal of mobilizing jointly 100 billion annually by 2020 from all sources to address the needs of developing countries in the context of meaningful mitigation actions and transparency on implementation and fully operationalize the Green Climate Fund through its capitalization as soon as possible. Lastly, promote mechanisms for raising capacity for effective climate change-related planning and management in the least developed countries and small island developing states, including focusing on women, youth, and local and marginalized communities. Given these points, I would like to give the floor to Mr. Paler to talk about the importance of why we need to talk about and be aware of climate change. Now, Mr. Paler, what is it to us?
First of all, I would like to thank you for inviting me in this podcast. This is such a great opportunity to publicize the happenings of our climate. So to start, in 2007, John Holdren, the president of American Association for the Advancement of Science, said that we basically have 3 choices: mitigation, adaptation, or suffering. We're going to do some of each. The question is what the mix is going to be. The more mitigation we do, the less adaptation will be required and the less suffering there will be. As we can see, our climate is changing, and the changes are primarily the result of human activities. Climate change is a real thing. Climate change is happening, and it is a serious problem, not only for humanity but basically for all living organisms, as we're all living on the same planet. That is why discussing climate change is important, because it allows us, the people, to not only gain an understanding of how it will affect us in the future, but also be aware of everything that is going on in our surroundings, allowing us to take all the necessary actions if necessary. However, if climate change is not addressed and all the necessary actions are not taken, then there is a high possibility that the Earth will take a toll on us. And when I said all of us, I meant all of us, no matter which part of the Earth we're located. We all still suffer the consequences since all of us are living on the same Earth. So what are these consequences I am talking about? These consequences include the melting of polar ice caps, an increase in sea level, global warming, severe weathers, and a collapse in the ecosystem. And these are only a few of all the many repercussions that will occur if we do not undertake all of the necessary actions.
Okay, so are you guys aware that in the Philippines there are policies, projects, or initiatives that have been implemented to address climate action? One of which is the Republic Act number 7942, also known as the Philippine Mining Act of 1995. The policy governs all mining operations in our country, which includes the measures to protect the environment. Therefore, it includes the development, exploration, processing, and utilization of all mineral resources. Next is the tree planting activities, which raises the awareness of people in the importance of trees in our environment. This is because trees diminish some effects of the climate change. It also recharges ground supply of the water and converts carbon dioxide in the atmosphere to oxygen. There are also cleanup activities on shores and other bodies of water in the Philippines. These activities raise the awareness of people regarding the effects of plastic waste in the bodies of water. Part of the climate action goal is to have a greener environment, and eliminating plastic waste in the bodies of water in our country is one of the ways in doing that. Furthermore, other people use bikes instead of gasoline-powered vehicles since it doesn't emit any gas pollution. Using bikes is one of the most practical and greener options when it comes to transportation. Moreover, vaccinations and immunizations reduces climate-sensitive diseases such as yellow fever, cholera, and Ebola, and especially in poor and vulnerable communities. Immunization are critical in building resilience in Filipinos and the system. Thus, vaccines help in mitigating climate change impacts. I also read an article once wherein we have few renewable sources of energy in our country. Under the National Renewable Energy Program, the Philippines envisioned on tripling renewable energy capacity by 2030. Several industries in the Philippines also use solar energy, and we also have wind resources from the northern and central part of the Philippines. How about you, Mr. Paler? What do you think are the resolutions to somehow stop the effects of climate change in our country? Can you share it with us?
Well, of course, Harvey. Okay, so in order to battle climate change, the very first thing that we should do is to lessen the use of fossil fuels and, if possible, find renewable sources of energy. But first things first, what is fossil fuel? Fossil fuels originate from plants and animals that existed in the geological past. And we, people, depend on those fuels to heat our homes, run our vehicles, power industries, and provide us with electricity. However, as we are doing so, we are emitting carbon pollution at the same time, which therefore causes what we all know as climate change. So what should we do and what can we do to help prevent it from getting worse? Let me give you some simple actions that we all can do to stop this phenomenon. First, we should avoid purchasing processed foods as they require energy to be produced. Just like what I said earlier, manufacturing industries require energy from the fossil fuels in order to manufacture food. If we continue to purchase this kind of goods, the industry will continually produce them as well. And if this trend continues, global warming will worsen and it would be our doomsday. The second thing that we should do is buy food nearby in order to lessen our carbon footprint. A carbon footprint is the amount of carbon dioxide and other carbon compounds emitted due to the consumption of fossil fuels. Now you might ask me why. Why should we buy food nearby? Here's why. It is because aside from it being convenient and energy saving for you, it is also helpful because when you buy food nearby, you won't need a vehicle anymore. And as we all know, our vehicles are powered by gasoline and diesel oil, which are fossil fuels. So if we are going to buy food in faraway places using our vehicles, then we are just adding to carbon emissions, thus making our climate even worse than it is. Third is that we need to generate renewable energy by installing solar panels. Now this is very important and highly recommended because solar power systems derive clean and pure energy from the sun. Installing solar panels in your home is very advantageous and beneficial because aside from reducing our monthly electricity bills, it also helps combat greenhouse gas emissions and reduces our collective dependence on fossil fuels. The fourth action that we can do to help the effects of climate change is to use LED lights. Why? It is because LED light bulbs can last up to 20 times longer than the standard forms of lighting, which has a very positive response or effect on the environment. And the fact that LED lights last longer means fewer bulbs need to be produced. And conversely, they do not need to be replaced as often. Now this is very true because according to a study conducted by the Climate Group, an organization with a mission to drive climate action, LED lighting achieves energy savings of 50 to 70% compared to the old technologies. And with that, if all people switch to energy efficient LED technology, there is a strong possibility that it could save over 1,400 million tons of carbon dioxide and avoid the construction of 1,250 power stations. Lastly, the most basic yet most important thing of all is planting trees. Tree planting is one of the simplest and most effective ways of combating climate change caused by greenhouse gases. As we are all aware of, as trees grow, they have the capability to absorb carbon dioxide, which is a major greenhouse gas in the atmosphere. Therefore, when all of us plant trees, there is a greater possibility that we will be able to reduce the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere and, subsequently, help reduce the impacts of climate change all around the globe.
Wow, thank you for that, Mr. Paler. That was very informative, as expected to a climate change researcher. Now, to proceed, the same question will be asked to Ms. Antolin. Apart from Mr. Paler has mentioned, what do you think, Ms. Antolin, are other resolutions to somehow stop the effects of climate change?
Okay, so I think I'm going to make mine short since most of what we need to know to stop or reverse climate change were mentioned by Mr. Paler. For me, as an environmental activist, I am really encouraging everyone to save energy, electricity, water, and supplies. Also, we can do big, even with small things like eliminating waste from lunches, plant more trees or plants, use eco-friendly bags instead of plastics, and if I may add, there is a municipal ordinance here in the Philippines that prohibits the use of non-biodegradable plastic bags, whereas the government is encouraging everyone to use eco bags or bring their own shopping bag instead. In my hometown, the municipality of Difun have the ordinance number 082014 that from then on the use of plastic bags are prohibited. So the vendors in our town only use paper bags and eco bags. And with my further research, many cities and provinces also made their own ordinance regarding on banning single-use plastics, and hopefully the people are really abiding. Moving on, the next resolution is to stop littering. And lastly, to reduce paper consumption. In reducing paper consumption, we may also reduce the paper reduction where we can save more trees. As a student, these are the things that we may do to reduce the usage of plastic. We could set our printers for back-to-back printing or utilize print preview to avoid unnecessary pages. And of course, we need to think before we print. And imagine a cord of wood that is approximately 8 feet wide, 4 feet deep, and 4 feet high can produce either 2,700 copies of an average daily newspaper or 942 pieces of 100 pages hardcover books. That is according to the study of Braille technology. Meanwhile, did you know that when we remove unwanted emails, we could also reduce the carbon footprints? According to the study of Krosowski, he mentioned that most emails, including spam ones, unread ones, and those you simply forgot and you never deleted, are generally stored on the cloud. Cloud storage requires quite a lot of electricity, which in most parts of the world is still generated by fossil fuels. If you will notice, these resolutions were mainly focused on how we should discipline ourselves and really push ourselves to make a difference. Sometimes it is just hard to talk about this if we will not practice what we preach. That is why it is important to have the sense of responsibility in each and every one of us. In simple terms, throughout the world, every single email is saved on a server. The extreme amount of data necessitates massive server farms, massive data centers with millions of machines that store and transport data. These servers consume tremendous quantities of electricity and require countless liters of water or air conditioning systems to keep it cool 24 hours a day. The more messages we send, receive, and store, the more servers are required, resulting in increase of energy consumption and carbon emissions.
So for the next question, do you think that these policies and projects will help the world become greener? Let's start with Mr. Paler.
Without a doubt, Harvey, the stated actions are definitely going to be effective, but it is dependent on how the people are going to act on them. It really solely depends on us because, as we all know, in every situation, there are only two sides. We have the bright side and we have the dark side as well. Now let us start with the bright side. So if the people took all the necessary actions, the results would be favorable. As a result, there will be less global warming, less melting of sea ice and glaciers in both poles, and there would be fewer environmental disasters such as droughts, storms, heat waves, forest fires, hurricanes, and flood. Also, there would be a halt in terms of death rates as the climate would be favorable for all. And lastly, a cleaner air also becomes attainable since the emission of carbon dioxide has been kept to a minimum. However, that was just one of the two sides. If that was the bright side, let us now take a look at the dark side. If we, the people, do not take action, there is a strong possibility that all the worst case scenarios will happen. And with that, it means that all the worst things that could happen will happen. Firstly, the temperature will rise, leading the ice caps to continue melting, which then results in the sea level to increase tremendously. Secondly, disasters will be frequent. Heat waves will become severe, which may subsequently lead to drought and more frequent forest fires. Thirdly, there would almost certainly be endless storms and hurricanes, which would increase the likelihood of flooding and also landslides. Thus, in a nutshell, if we are going to act, then we definitely have the capability to win this battle. But if there would be no action, there's a great possibility that our planet, along with everything on it, will soon face extinction.
How about you, Miss Antoline? What are your thoughts?
No, Harvey, I do agree with what Mr. Paler had said, that there are two ends, the bright side and we also have the dark side as well. And this will all be depending on how the people of our world are going to take actions. But we should know that there are also ongoing problems in achieving these policies and resolutions. In fact, I have 3 reasons why some countries are having a hard time defending climate change or even just to follow these policies. First of all, developing countries will have a hard time combating climate action because of limited social safety nets and poverty. And this is one of the main goals of climate action, to give and provide funding for the developing countries. However, in my opinion, I think the United Nations will have a hard time giving sufficient funds to every developing country since it is not just about the money, but also the implementation. As we all know, combating poverty and other economic issues may require extensive time and effort. A research from Shiran et al. Shows that the increase of the economy promotes the increase of carbon emissions in one of the regions in China, but it also has a restraining effect on the carbon emissions in the surrounding areas. Hence, countries that have underdeveloped economies will have a difficult time choosing alternative solutions in reducing greenhouse emissions, while those countries with higher GDP can reduce total net or their greenhouse gas emissions. Thirdly, the politics inside mitigation policies. The politics inside mitigating the policies of climate change was a result of the different perspectives on how we should respond or fight climate change. Just like all other policies, the political debate inside climate change is more about action. Different evaluations of the threat's urgency as well as the feasibility, benefits, and drawbacks of various responses are at the center of climate change politics. However, they are all related to possible climate change responses. Until this day, an international agreement on a viable climate change framework has not been reached.
Okay, so for the next portion of this podcast, we will look at the questions of our viewers. So this is for you, Mr. Paler, from at Respect My Opinion 7. If you were given a chance to have a voice in Congress, what actions or suggestions would you propose for our climate?
As far as I know, Harvey, about 1.4 billion people around the world rely on traditional fuels like coal and wood to make their basic energy needs. This is not only harmful to the environment, but it can also lead to premature deaths for millions of people, especially women and children. If I was given a chance to have a voice in Congress, the actions or suggestions that I would propose for our climate is mitigation. These mitigation strategies include making buildings more energy efficient, utilizing renewable energy sources such as solar, wind, and small hydro, assisting cities in developing more sustainable transportations such as bus rapid transit, electric vehicles, and biofuels, and most importantly, promoting more sustainable land and forest uses. That way, it will not only help us, the people of today, but also the people of tomorrow by giving them a habitable planet to live upon over the next few years.
Ms. Antolin, can you answer this next question from our live viewers? From at Climate Change Activist for Lenny, how will you explain climate change to a 4-year-old child?
Honestly, for me, I think I will just tell the kids straight that before we could play under the scorching sun for hours without getting a heat stroke or this massive sun damage. Also, if you could observe, it should be summertime now here in the Philippines, but it is still raining and there are storms coming in the country. You see, Harvey, I think these types of examples can be easily understood by a 4-year-old, saying that there are things that we need to consider normal before, like the temperature and the seasonal weather that changes over time. And to simply put it, I would tell this child that climate change is the long-term changes in global temperatures and the patterns in weather. That is all. Thank you.
Okay, so I will answer this last question from the comments. From at Kubianon Tapat, what will be the best thing to do to have a significant impact on addressing climate change? In my opinion, the best thing to do is for the Philippine government to join an international climate change conference. We should also team up with other countries in preventing large countries such as China, US, Europe, and Russia, especially China, since they emit most carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. Thus, I think that we should fix this problem with the help of other countries. So before we end this podcast, I would like to request an end statement, insights, or quote from our speakers. Let's start with Mr. Amando. Next is Ellery and me.
As an ending statement, I am reminding everyone that our future and the future of those generations to follow relies solely on all of us. They will all suffer the consequences of whatever actions we take now. So if we want our planet to still be habitable for us and for them, we have to act now. The best time to save our planet is now. The best time to switch from fossil fuels to renewable energy sources is now. The best time to plant a tree is now. And of course, this won't happen without a personal initiative, since it really starts with each and every one of us. If we really want change, then let us make ourselves the change. As Wendell Berry has said, the earth is what we all have in common. Thus, if we do not make any changes in how we treat our planet, then we will be in a much worse situation than where we are now. And since we all share the same planet, all of us will also suffer if we don't do so. So, as inhabitants of Earth, it is our collective responsibility to look after it, to take care of it. We each have one life and one planet, and each of our lives is dependent on the other. Therefore, if we care about our lives, we must likewise care about our planet.
I believe that in times of natural disaster, it is a major wake-up call to all Filipinos and even the people all over the world that our weather is changing. Extreme droughts or strong typhoons name all of it. They are slowly draining and destroying our lives since they are becoming stronger compared to the past few generations. And if we do not act now, who knows when the expiration date of our planet can be? We should wake up to the fact that these weather patterns are not normal and be aware that the people can contribute so much if we will just give our best to actually live responsibly, not just for ourselves but also for our planet. And before I will leave the floor to Mr. Tan, I would like to cite this quote from the movie Don't Look Up. We really did have everything, didn't we? I mean, when you think about it. We have a life and the earth, and I think the last thing that we should do is to take it for granted.
So for me, voters should also consider candidates who are involved in climate change activities and policy making. It is empirical for every Filipino to choose politicians who wants to improve our environment and to make our country more green. And it is sad that this is the most disregarded factor in voting. Filipinos nowadays tend to vote to people who are corrupt or politicians who are prominent in destroying our country's forests, land areas, and mountains. And that's a wrap, everyone. Thank you for listening to our podcast today. And we also hope that you learned something from our deep dive into the planet's current situation. Thank you for listening!